The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Now on the Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the house of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He then told them the parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. He said, when you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at the table at the place of honor. For a more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, you must give your place to this man. And then you're going to proceed with embarrassment to the lowest place. No, rather, when you are invited, you go, humble yourself to the lowest place, so that when the host comes, he may say to you, my friend, move up to a higher position. And then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts themselves will be humbled, and everyone who humbles themselves will be exalted. And then he said to the host who invited him, now when you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors in case they might invite you back and you have your repayment. No, when you hold a banquet, you invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Oh, blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid in the resurrection of the righteous. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise Amen. Humilitas est veritas. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in so many ways. Can't wait to look in the mirror, because I get better looking each day. To know me is to love me. I must be a heck of a man. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble, but I'm doing the best that I can. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. I'm very proud of that. But I shouldn't be. It was a terrible rendition. And yet we are. We're not really very humble people at all. As a matter of fact, if you look at our politics, you look at our economic situation, you look at our sports, you even look at our religion, we are the most litigious, arrogant, fighting people in the world. No, I shouldn't say in the world. We're probably all in the same boat. It is as American as apple pie to be arrogant and to try to strive for number one, to be the very best. And there's something very good about that, but there is also something very dangerous about that. A little girl comes home from school and she says, Mommy, I was number 2 in the spelling bee. And Mommy says, who was number 1? What are we saying to that little girl? We're saying that unless you are perfect in every way, then you don't even exist. And that's the crux of our problem. And it's a terrible problem in our culture. And I'm speaking of the human culture, because every one of us is infected by it. I say this because today, the Lord seems to be taking us in an absolute opposite direction. All the readings are about humility. We heard from Ben Sirach today, who says that the greater you are, the more humble you are to be. That's so hard and foreign to our understanding. And yet, they once asked St. Bernard of Clairvaux, what are the 3 most important virtues? He says the 3 most important virtues are humility, humility, humility. As a matter of fact, humility is called the queen of the virtues. I'm afraid we don't hear homilies very often on humility because it really is so very foreign to us. And yet, why is it so utterly, absolutely, indispensably important? And it really is. Because God is humble. God is the most humble of all. don't think of God as being humble. We always think of God as all-powerful. What do we say in every prayer? Oh, all-powerful and almighty God. We don't start out by saying all meek and all humble God, and yet God is utterly humble because God only really has one power. And that's not a power to dominate. It's a power to create. It's the power of love. God in some ways is a one-trick pony. The only thing he's got in his bag is love. As a matter of fact, we say our God is love. And it's this relationship between the Father and the Son who is constantly giving love from one to the other, and that constant giving of love creates. It must go outside of itself, and that's how we say that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. It goes outside of itself and it makes something more. That's where we come in. You see, we are told that all of creation is an expression of God. All of creation, as St. Francis loved to say, is God's footprint. You see, God created what's called ex nihilo. Ex nihilo is a fancy Latin word that simply means he created out of nothing. And so the stars and the moon and the sun and the plants and the animals and the fish and the birds and the sea creatures and even us are created out of nothing, and we are held only in existence by the love of God at this moment. At this moment. I used to tell the little children, if God stopped existing, stopped being aware of you at this moment, you would not exist. We are held in existence by God. Now, humility is knowing this. Right? And all of the creation knows this. The plants know this, the animals know this, the sea knows this, the stars, the sky. All of God's creation knows this, except one. Guess which one? Ta-da! Us. We're the only ones who don't know that. As a matter of fact, we really think that we are independent agents. One day, St. Catherine of Siena was very much full of herself, and she was bragging about how spiritually adept she was. And then she heard the voice of God and a colloquy from God, and God says, "Oh, Catherine, I am he who is, you are she who is not." Which basically means that without me, you don't exist. That's just a fact. One of the arguments an atheist can never, ever answer, ever, is why is there something rather than nothing? What's the cause? The cause is this creation of love. But we, in our arrogance, in our pride, and the original sin was pride. What was the original sin of Adam and Eve? They wanted knowledge of good and evil. They wanted to be like God. They wanted to have the answer. They wanted to be in control. So they invented something. It's called the ego. Never existed. You know, when Adam and Eve first came into the Garden of Eden, they were naked. They were running around. They were having a grand old time. There was no fighting. There was no war. The animals were getting along. And all of a sudden, they ate of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they realized now that they were separate from each other and that they were naked and that they had to begin to clothe themselves because they were embarrassed. And we have been covering up ever since. The job of the ego is to cover up. They went from unitive consciousness, everything is one, I am one with the trees and the stars, to self-consciousness. And self-consciousness realizes that I am over and against you, and I'd better take care of me because there might not be enough for me and for thee. Buckminster Fuller said the only reason for there is any war is because we're afraid there's not enough to go around. We live in a world of scarcity. And yet God has created this world of incredible abundance, but we don't know how to use the abundance because we are so afraid that I've got to have mine, and I never have enough, because the ego can never be fed enough. It is so delicate because it's only a construct of our mind. It doesn't exist in reality. My self-identity, who I think I am, has nothing to do with who I am in God. As a matter of fact, it's going to die when I die. My education, my talents, my abilities, all that stuff, my bank account, you know. Billy Graham was so fond of saying, you've never seen the U-Haul follow the hearse. Huh? He ain't taking it with, it's not going to go with you. Yet in our arrogance, in our pride, our orgullo, as the Spanish would say, in our pride, we think we are in control. And we're not. It is the cause of our pain. I dare to say that it's the cause of all the pain in the world. Outside of the physical pain that you're going through, which is part of nature, but the psychological pain and the spiritual pain that we go through, we cause. And mostly by our arrogance, by one being against the other. And that goes for individuals, that goes for cultures, that goes for religions. Look at the religious wars that are going on right now. Why? Because I'm the best. I've got the answers. I've got to be number one. And that goes for the whole universe. Now the question we've got to ask is the Dr. Phil question. And the Dr. Phil question is this. How's that working for you? It's not working for us very well, is it? I mean, it really isn't working for us very well at all. And it's not the will of God. The will of God is for us to be free. And we cannot be free as long as we are always jockeying for position. We're like the guy in the gospel who is jockeying for position. He wants to be in the first place. He wants to be at the head of the table. He's not enjoying himself. As a matter of fact, he's filled with anxiety because he's worried about what they're going to think about him, how he's going to look, how he's going to come off. And so he's really in a real strait, and Jesus says, oh, let it go. As a matter of fact, go to the lower place. You know, I used to live in the poorest area in the whole Diocese of Joyce, a place called Hopkins Park. We lived next to the earth. We had absolutely nothing. It was the largest rural black community north of the Mason-Dixon line. And it was right during the huge recession of the early 80s. And everybody was moaning and groaning how terrible it was. And he says, how are you people doing out there? He says, we're doing fine. He says, well, it's terrible because people are committing suicide. He says, no. He says, no one's ever committed suicide jumping out of a basement flat, okay? When you're at the bottom, humus, earth, humility, then there's only one place to go, and that's up. When I know that I need mercy, when I don't have the answers, when I'm not in control, when I can say, oh, God, have mercy, it's there. When I don't need God, when I've got the answers, I'm living in illusion, and I constantly have to build walls to protect myself. My goodness, what are we doing with the walls, huh? Build walls to protect myself, or monuments to myself. I need the golden escalator, or whatever it is. It says, look how special I am. Look how important I am. And yet we're all the same. You see, what we've forgotten is that we are not the pinnacle of the universe. We may be created in the image and likeness of God. We may have that free will and we may have that intelligence, but that is to honor and glory God and to realize that we are part of a greater whole, a much greater whole. It isn't all about us. We are one among many. We are one among the universe. And we have had the arrogance to think that the whole world is created just for us. C.S. Lewis put it this way. He says, humility is truth. And the truth is we're not in control. Humility is freedom. And the freedom comes from not having to be in control, not having to call all the shots, not having to be God. And C.S. Lewis put it this way. Humility is not so much thinking less of yourself, but simply thinking of yourself less. Not being caught up in how I'm looking, how I'm dressing, how I'm coming off. And that opens up a whole new vista for us, because now we can see that we are one among many, and not just one among other human beings, but we are one among all of God's creation. God's creation is humble. The earth is humble. We are able then now to be one with that earth. Right now we're not. But right now, in our arrogance, we are on the pericope of self-destruction. Because we have taken God's creation and in our arrogance used all of the resources of this wonderful planet of ours as our storehouse. And when we're done, we use it as our sewer. Well, Mother Nature's not going to be able to take that forever. It's going to come back. As a matter of fact, the part of what's going on so much in our world right now, with not just the tectonic plates shifting, but what's going on in all of our climate change, is her way of saying, you have not been humble. You have not been part of the entire system. You see, the destiny of the earth and the destiny of humanity are intrinsically tied together. It is in our arrogance that we think that we are superior. We are not. And the future of us as a species depends on our ability to know veritas, the truth, humility.